Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, NEAR members, and honored guests. My name is Rich Goucher, NEAR president, and it gives me great pleasure to welcome you here today. As a youngster, I began at Plainville Stadium watching my good friend Don Moon wheel his car around with Dave Alkus, Ron Wyckoff, Jap Membrino, and watched them wow the crowds. All of you went to your own local racetracks and saw your own heroes travel around, race around the tracks. Later on, me and my brew crew, we owned and campaigned race cars on a modified tour and became crew chiefs. And later a tire man and got to race with my hero, Reggie Ruggiero, and win. Now I'm honored to lead this great organization into the future. On behalf of our members, thank you all for joining us here today as we induct the 2021 class of honorees into the NEAR Hall of Fame. Every one of us are racing enthusiasts. We were born and bred into it, were introduced into it, and got hooked, or knew someone that dedicated their lives to it and is being honored here today. There are many clubs that race vintage race cars around the speedways of New England. NEAR is the only one that dedicates itself towards preserving the rich racing history of our region and honors our standout representatives. We have a fine class of honored guests being inducted today, and we could not be more proud of them. We thank you for your dedication to our sport. An event of this magnitude cannot be presented without the assistance of key individuals to see it through to completion. I would like to personally thank everyone who's had a part in making this event today. On your table, you'll find a program for today's ceremony, supported by a multitude of NEAR friends and sponsors. Please support those that support our efforts. We will also have an auction later on for some remarkable collectible items. We'll have a little auction when the program is over. Our 2021 t-shirts are on sale over here. Just see any of the folks over here. And to the rest of our guests, I sincerely hope that you have a great day. Gentlemen, I would like to introduce next. Well, first off, I think just about everybody in this room knows Matt Buckler. Matt Buckler is supposed to be our MC here today. Matt had a bit of a procedure done in the hospital, and he's still in the hospital. He's okay, but he just had to have something taken care of. So Matt's not going to be with us today. In his stead, I tapped his sidekick and partner down at the Waterford Speed Bowl and the Stafford Motor Speedway. He's a very famous pit reporter, and he runs all over the place getting the best interviews that he possibly can to make your stay at the racetrack enjoyable. He's also a dear friend to me, and I'd like to introduce to you Dave Barabal.
Thank you, Rich. I think famous is kind of stretching it a little bit, but ladies and gentlemen, all of our Hall of Fame members, our honorees, our inductees today, congratulations on your induction into the NEAR Hall of Fame. I've been fortunate enough that I had 4 Hall of Famers touch my life: Billy Greco, Eddie Flimke, Fred DeSaro, and Bugsy Stevens. Now, some of you, maybe I never got to see you race, hear your words come over a microphone, or read your words. But you did something to boys and girls that those drivers did for me: install a love of this sport and a passion that we will always carry forever. I thank all of you. And now, we begin our awards ceremony. The Frank Murata Award will be presented by April May Preston.
It's nice to see such a full room. The Frank Murata Award is given annually to a member of our racing community who has made outstanding contributions to auto racing in New England. Frankly, I'm surprised it's taken this long to give this gentleman this award. Stanley Skip Matzik is the owner-operator of Seals at Allen Tool in Ellington, Connecticut, producing grommets, seals, and other devices which are used by every NASCAR team on the circuit. During his 42 years of car ownership with his late wife Lois, he had many famous drivers behind the wheel of one of his super modifieds, such as Richie Evans, Warren Bentley, Otto Sitterly, and Doug D'Addario, the '96 International Classic winner, to name but a few. The pinnacle of their ownership was the 3 straight 1994 to 96 Oswego Speedway Championships, plus the 96 International Classic. It was just dessert for the many years he and Lois dedicated to the sport, going back to his association with a Buddy Krebs driven modified in the 1960s. I didn't have the pleasure of meeting Skip until about 11 years ago when he approached us about bringing the Dirt Midget Association to Bear Ridge Speedway after Whip City closed. He wasn't done with racing yet. Over the years, he, along with Ray Miller, have served as principal operators and have made the now USAC-sanctioned DMA Midgets one of the headline divisions, and he has had the honor of having had several championship drivers, with the most recent being Seth Carlson. He and Ray were recently awarded the Bob Shepard 4D Award at the Ridge's 2021 Annual Awards Banquet. The 4 Ds, you ask? Drive, desire, determination, and dedication. Fitting, right? Skip is currently on the board of NEAR, the Northeast Motorsports Museum, and a NEAR Hall of Fame member. It is with great pleasure and honor that I'm able to present the Frank Murata Award for Outstanding Contributions to Auto Racing in New England to my very dear friend, Stanley Skip Matzik.
I'm very humbled, and I thank you very much. April and I have worked at the DMA group for the last few years at Bear Ridge. As vice president of NEAR, I have to say, walking into this beautiful room, how it's been prepared, organized. The food was great. The camaraderie is even more wonderful. Having an association with you wonderful people and being able to share the same thoughts and dreams, and then to be standing here and being recognized is truly humbling. And I wish to thank you very, very much for this award.
Now, if you have been to NEAR banquets, I'm going to do my one Matt Beckler impersonation. How many of you here today have the yellow stripe behind you and are first-time visitors to the NEAR Hall of Fame banquet? If you'd please stand. Okay. Ah, we have quite a few. All right. Now, next, how many of you are from Connecticut? So show of applause will do. Okay. How many from Massachusetts? How many from New Hampshire? Vermont? Maine? And lastly, where I'm going to guess most are, how many are from Florida? Next up, to present the Radam Mitchell Award, please welcome Paul Massey.
I'm never one to complain, but he forgot Rhode Island.
And my mother's home state.
How many from Rhode Island? 3. Well, that's why we're a small state. If you look at page 15 in your booklet, it kind of gives you an idea of the importance of this award. It gives you an idea on who has received it. It's an award for outstanding media coverage in New England racing. And this year, the winner is Sean Cunha. On August 18th, 1995, Sean attended his first short track racing event. He was providing coverage for the Friday night show at Stafford Motor Speedway for the Hartford Courant newspaper. Little did he realize that night was the first of many to be spent in the pits covering all forms of motorsports. From 1997 to May 2012, Sean was a lead reporter covering motorsports for the Hartford Courant. During that time, he brought everything from coverage of the NASCAR Sprint Cup Series sports car racing to drag racing, motocross, pages of motocross, and at the pages of the Hartford Courant. Sean's emphasis was long on covering 3 NASCAR-sanctioned short tracks in Connecticut. In 2007, Sean began producing an auto racing blog called The Backstretch for the Courant. It quickly became the most quickly trafficked site on the Courant's deep and varied blog lineup and remained that way for many years. However, in May of 2012, he made the decision to leave the newspaper to launch the website racedayconnecticut.com. The The website focuses on coverage of short track racing and over 10 years has grown to become one of the leading media outlets for motorsports coverage in New England. Sean has proven himself to be a fine journalist and has brought the best of New England racing news into homes throughout the region. We are proud to present to Sean Cushain with the 2021 Rada Mitchell Award for Outstanding Media Contribution to New England Racing. Sean.
This is an amazing honor, and I thank all the members of NEAR and the New England Racing Hall of Fame for this recognition. I didn't get into journalism to win awards or recognition, and it's actually not something I'm comfortable with. I was a kid who just wanted to be a newspaper reporter. I fell in love with newspapers when I was 8 years old, and it was a dream to be a newspaper reporter. And I somehow landed at the Hartford Courant when I was 21 years old, and I had a couple mentors at the paper who kind of said, you know, there's a lot of young kids here who want to cover the Red Sox and the Yankees, and they're not going to get a chance because there's too many people. But if you put yourself in the niche sports that other people don't necessarily want to do, you can get opportunities. And all I wanted to do was write stories. And you know, one of the places I had never been to a racetrack. I grew up in Agawam, Mass, 2 miles from Riverside Park. I lived there from when I was 8 years old till I was 16. I lived 2 miles from Riverside Park. The only thing I knew about the racetrack was when I was at the top of the Thunderbolt, I could see over the fence and see there was a racetrack there. My family wasn't involved in racing, and it was foreign to me. And oddly, when I was 16 years old, my parents moved to Stafford, Connecticut, and I lived 4 miles from a racetrack that I never went to. And then working at the Hartford Courant on a Friday night, the regular auto racing reporter on August 18th, 1995, needed a night off at the last minute, and they called me because they knew I lived in Stafford. Said, can you go over to the racetrack and cover? And I remember telling my boss, I said, I've never been to a race. I don't know anything about this. And he said, well, you'll figure it out when you get there. And what I remember about that night was Bo Gunning moved Tony Sylvester for the lead on the last lap in the SK modified race, and Bo had some colorful words to say about Tony Sylvester and wrote it in my story, and I was all excited. I had this drama-filled story, and this was well before email and instant messaging and anything like that, but I had a voicemail on my phone in the office on Monday from Tony Sylvester, who said, I can't believe you wrote that stuff that Bo said, and I hope you never cover another race in your life. And I was like, wow, I guess I found my niche here, you know? And who would have thought 27 years later I would still be doing it? But I found in motorsports, despite not having any history or understanding, what I found immediately when I got into motorsports was the passion of the people involved made the stories amazing. And every time you went to a racetrack, there was just cool stories to write. So even though I didn't grow up a fan of motorsports, I quickly understood what it was about in short track racing and how important it meant to the people there and how important I was in getting those stories out to people. So I had a blast at the Hartford Courant. I spent 19 years there. I lived a dream of a kid who just wanted to be a newspaper reporter. Unfortunately, the newspaper industry, as a lot of people know, has gone far downhill. And I saw the writing on the wall, and I realized in about 2011 that I had fallen in love with covering auto racing. I had covered the major beats at the Hartford Courant. I was a UConn football beat reporter. I was involved with UConn basketball coverage. I was involved with covering the Giants and the Patriots, but I loved covering motorsports. And it was a night in 2011, my boss said to me, I don't think we can go to Loudon for the September event. And that was a red flag to me because the budget constraints. And I ended up talking him into getting me to Loudon that weekend, but it made me think, wow, this is going in the wrong direction, and I don't want to lose this sport that I love covering. And that started the wheels turning of how can I do it on my own? And I came up with this idea of starting a website. And in April of 2012, the newspaper announced they were going to offer a buyout, and you'd get a year's pay. And I said, this is my chance. I'm going to take it. I had no idea how to run a business. I had no idea how to do sales or even run a website. I just said, I'm just going to go for it. And I went for it. I had a lot of great people in the sport behind me that helped me, and I'm forever grateful to those people that did it. And now, I just completed my 10th year covering motorsports for racedayct.com. The website grows every year, and it grows thanks to the people in the sport and the passion they show, and that people still want to read about this sport and still love to read the stories that are there. So I thank everybody from NEAR for this award. It's even more special to me in that when I started sport, there was two really important people to me that had been deeply involved in the sport. One is Pete Zanardi, who's here. Pete kind of took me under his wing in the press box at Stafford, and I learned so much from Pete Zanardi. And then the other one was Charlie Mitchell. And Charlie, when I was young and I came into this sport, I'm not going to deny I was a little brash, and I wanted to show people I know what I'm doing. And I probably rubbed a lot of the reporters that had been there the wrong way. And Charlie saw in me something that nobody else saw, and Charlie and I became really great friends, and I miss him so much. But it's such an honor to win an award that has Charlie's name on it, because Charlie meant a lot to me. So I thank everybody from NEAR, and I thank everybody for reading and supporting journalism and motorsports, and I hope to do it for a long, long time from now.
Well, I'd like to thank Paul for reminding me that I forgot Rhode Island. That means my mom will yell at me all the way home back to Connecticut. And also, I find it very surprising, Sean, that Bo Gunning, someone I raced quarter midgets against, would move somebody and actually have some comments about moving them. Next up is the Danny Pardee Memorial Award, and that will be presented by Pete Newsom.
Thank you very much, Dave. Welcome, everybody. I don't know if you've had the same kind of problem that I do, but this suit shrunk in lockdown. We started off saying quarantine 19, or it was the quarantine 15 was the phrase. Now we need to get quarantine and rhyme something with 30. Danny Pardee was a very dedicated individual. A lot of people in this room had a chance to be friends with Danny. He inspired a lot of people. He was dedicated to auto racing, to NEAR, to the Hall of Fame. As its inception with Al Feeney, when they first started this thing, he was in charge of setting all this, the halls up and all that stuff to get the thing rolling into what it is today. We entered 2021 with a small light at the end of the tunnel. We weren't sure if we were going to be able to do this again. Some of the snowbirds in Florida were talking on the phone saying, hey, what are we going to do? Are we going to have a Hall of Fame? We can't go 2 years. And I got together with my vice chair, me and Mark Alden, and with Rich Goucher. We started talking. And then I got 2 phone calls in February. One, the first phone call was from Mark Alden. He said, Pete, we need to put the blinders on. We need to go forward. We got to figure this thing out. We can hit every timeline. If something happens in November, we can't do it. We can be creative like so many people have been doing. We can do this. The second phone call was, he called me and told me that JP's in Westboro was open, that we could now go on Saturdays and eat chicken wings and drink beer. So I knew that light was going to get bigger. We started opening things up. We met every deadline. We went and we had a selection committee meeting. We got 16 people. April, May, the unsung hero, put together the ballots, sent them out. We reduced it to 8, but we still had no place to go. I got another phone call. Mark Alden, he said, I got a guy, and he owns the Westford Regency, and here we are today. It took a lot of doing, a lot of dedication. Mark's been doing auto racing stuff since he was 7 years old, owning cars, great representative for NEAR, great help with the Hall of Fame, and he's still restoring cars to this day, and every time he calls me, he says, that's it, that's my last car. The next phone call is, hey, I just got a quarter midget I'm going to restore. Very dedicated. I am proud to present the Danny Pardee Memorial Award for dedication to this Hall of Fame to Mr. Mark Alden.
Thanks, Pete. JP's is going to be open again this Saturday, so we can have some beers. But we get a lot accomplished on Saturday afternoons when we meet a lot of great people who we've raced with. I started my first 1976 opening night at Westboro Speedway. My car won the late model race with Eddie Weston as my driver. And Eddie continued to drive for me for many years. But that night, I was a skinny little long-haired kid. You can tell by the shade of my hair and my body, some things have changed. But my high school sweetheart was with me, and we went to Victory Lane. And I never knew that was going to change my whole life on racing. And 45 years later, she's back with me today. Cheryl, thank you. I love you, and thanks for coming. And there's one other person who has helped me along this way, my crew chief, Ronnie St Germain. With all the crazy stuff I throw at him, he says, okay, we will get it done. And we always get it done. So, Ronnie, thank you very much for being the crew chief. And thanks, Nia, for this award.
Our next award will be the Ron Bouchard Memorial Award, and that will be presented by Paula Flemke Bouchard. Paula, just one note. Even though my brother's godfather is Billy Greco, your husband, Ron, was probably his favorite driver, and he wears number 17 in his honor.
One thing people often bring up when they speak about Ronnie is his people skills. In his racing career, he did his best to make time for every person who stopped to chat, whether it was an old friend in the pits or a young fan he was meeting for the first time. He understood the value of the personal touch and giving each person the proper attention. The same was true when we opened our automobile dealerships, whether a customer wanted to meet Ron Bouchard, the race car driver, or Ron Bouchard, the man whose name was on the building, Ronnie would try to accommodate that person. When it came to racetrack promoters in New England, Dick Williams had the same easygoing way about him and those same people skills. That's probably why Ronnie thought so highly of him. They met in the early 70s when Ronnie started racing for Bob Johnson at Stafford, where Dick was the handicapper. Later, when Dick began promoting races, Ronnie ran for him often at the Waterford Speed Bowl, Westboro Speedway, Monadnock Speedway, and Thompson Speedway. Like everyone else, he liked the personal touch that Dick Williams brought to promoting and the fact that Dick cared about the people who raced for him. Even after Ronnie went Winston Cup racing, we still lived in Fitchburg, and for the next few years, he still raced modifieds whenever he had a free night. And he always did what he could to run at one of Dick's tracks. He knew that Dick didn't have things easy. He was leasing those tracks, and sometimes he would suffer because of rainouts. Ronnie felt that if his presence could sell a few more tickets, he was happy to do that for a friend. Even in recent years, when Dick and his partner, Jim Schaefer, have given modified racing a boost with their innovative promotional team they call the Racing Guys, Dick Williams has continued to do things with a personal touch. Dick, you always remind me that in your younger days, you were a big fan of my father, Ed Flemke, and I know how much you thought of Ronnie. I'm sure that both them will be smiling as you step up and accept the 2021 Ron Bouchard Memorial Award.
Wow. Am I that guy? Everything has happened to me in racing. This is probably the best thing that ever happened to me. Because what a lot of you people don't know is how much this lady and her family have given to auto racing. But not only that, what I'm more proud of is what they did outside of auto racing. They contribute to their community. They started the Ron Bouchard golf tournament, auto charities, and have done great things, providing vans, programs, and honoring Ronnie, but also showing everybody what the races are like. And I thank them so much because this is truly a great honor. Thank you, Paul. I also have to thank, I look here and I look out, and just about every table, I see someone that helped me along the way or that has been good for racing, and I thank them so much. and then especially my guys in the back, the racing guys. I'm going to tell you something that you're going to think that this is probably not true. But them guys over the last few years, I was figuring it out the other night, have raised over $750,000 for the races. This is on top of the purses that the guys paid. And you know what? There isn't one guy there that worked that has taken anything for this. They put money in to do this. So thank them guys very, very much. And a couple of things. I had the privilege when Neil was started, Mr. Stebbins, the Clocks, Eddie Flimke, they invited me to these meetings. And I was just a nobody, a young guy. But I understood all the other sports. They were honoring their guys. And our sport was doing nothing to honor the guys that have got us here. And two of them were Bill Slater and Eddie Flemke. They both brought different things. Bill on the racing side, Eddie on the life side, teaching me lessons and doing this. And if I'd ever listened to them, boy, I could have been something. But you know how you are when you're young. You got to do your own thing. But I thank God for them guys and everyone else here that has helped. Because, you know, I'm a smart guy, but my favorite saying is a blind squirrel gets a nut once in a while. But I was smart enough to surround myself with all these different individuals. Johnny Falcone, Bill Welch, just so many guys. I can't remember them all now because there's a lot going on in my mind right now. And I apologize because there's so many people I can see. And a lot of the sports writers that I see here, all my friends, and everyone that's contributed to auto racing. And what we've tried to do, our races are supposed to be races honoring races. Well, we all get to a point where we have to end it. And this has happened to me. The doctors gave me a choice, and I think finally I'm going to listen. But we're going to do one more race, races honoring races in the spring. I'm not doing it. My racing guys are Maurice Enterprises, one of my sponsors, big sponsors like Paula, that have donated thousands of dollars. And these people ask for nothing. This young lady, I can't tell you. I'll call her and ask her, Dickie, you handle it. She goes, I got faith in you. Well, I thank you so much, your family, everybody. And I thank everyone here for all the friends that I've made and all the friends that I'm going to be honored today. There's a couple of you I don't know, but I know the names. But the rest of you I know, and you all deserve it. And God bless everyone, and thank you very much.
And Paul and Dick, I'd like to say thank you from the Waterford Speed Bowl because I got to call some spectacular races during the Fast Five. If any of you didn't get to see any of that racing action, I suggest that you go to Sid's View. He has great recaps of all the action that we did this year at the Speed Bowl. So thank you again, Paul and Dick, for all you did for that racing that I was able to be a part of and be a voice of. Next up, we will call up Near Hall of Fame co-chair Mark Alden as he has a special presentation.
We're going to start off today with the 2021 Veterans Committee honorees. And the first person is going to be Ted Stack. Ted Stack was one of the best ever to run a wheel at the New London Waterford Speed Bowl. Ted was a dominating force in the modified non-Ford division. In his career, he won events throughout the Northeast on both dirt and asphalt tracks. Ted began racing at the Waterford Speed Bowl in 1953. His first win a year later. Ted's 70 career wins still ranks inside the top 10 on the all-time win list for nearly 60 years after his last victory. He was the non-Ford division champion in 1957 and 1960 and the modified champion in 1961. The 1961 season was remarkable While running both divisions, he won 19 times at Waterford and also collected a pair of wins at the Stafford Motor Speedway. Ted won 8 mid-season point titles as well. In 1961, he raced in the Race to Champions at the 1.5-mile track at Trenton Super Speedway in Trenton, New Jersey. In a 1973 history of the Speed Bowl written by John Brower Sr., Stack was listed as one of the 10 greatest drivers in Waterford track history. Ted finished his career with 5 wins on the 5/8-mile Thompson Speedway from 1964 and 67. Here to accept the 2021 Veterans Hall of Fame Award is Ted's son, Ted Stack Jr. Okay, not here. We'll go on to number 2. Andy Cody. During the 1950s, when the flathead engine was king in the stock car racing world, Andy Cody was recognized as a championship race car builder. Andy was born in 1927 and raised in Lowell, Mass. Andy's mechanical expertise came to the forefront while working at a Lowell auto dealership in 1943. Hastings Piston Rings Company presented Andy with the Mechanic of the Year award. He received this award at the age of 16. Andy returned to Lowell after hitching the Marines and embarked on the world of mechanical engineering. Within a few years, Andy became a race car builder and chief mechanic for several championship drivers, including Tony Colicchio at the Guilford Bowl, 1955, Porky Kinsman at the Pines and at Hudson in 1956, Hal Wilcox at Hudson and at the Pines in 1957, Ollie Silver at Hudson and the Pines in 1958, Ollie Silver at Dover and West Peabody and Westboro, 59 and 60. In 1960, after winning the quarterly championship at the West Peabody Speedway, Andy and Ollie were invited to race the NASCAR-sanctioned Riverside in Montreal. Here, the car set a track record for flathead Ford engines and won the event against modifieds with overhead cammed engines. Chrysler Corporation was so impressed with the car's performance, they hired Andy to build a modified race car for Chrysler to race in Canada. The Cody-built race car with driver Giles Brochu set new track records on speedways across Canada. Andy stayed on in Canada to serve as chief mechanic. And on July 4th, 1960, the Chrysler was brought to Dover, Delaware for the International Championship race. The Brochu and Co. team won $1,000 first-place money in the event and received a 500-point penalty from NASCAR for racing a non-sanctioned track. For the 61-62 season, Andy joined Tony Colicchio and former CNC Engineering build winning race cars for Vermont's Thunder Road and Northeastern Speedway. It gives us great pleasure to recognize Andy Coates as one of our 2021 Veterans Hall of Fame inductee. Accepting his award is his son, Andy Coates Jr.
Again, on behalf of my late father, I just want to say thank you to all those involved in the nomination and induction process. Specifically, like to recognize Paul Zampieri, who reached out to me last year, told me about this upcoming event and the other event that recently happened at Pines. Appreciate his help in bringing some of this to the forefront. My dad was not really a big public speaker, and neither am I, but I would suggest that he would have had 2 ideas specifically about this event. One was he'd be really grateful that it's here. We lived formerly in Nabnasset, right next to the country club. He had his garage in Lowell, Tewksbury. All of these towns were places where he called home. And secondly, he also, in his life, thought that the builders and the owners of the cars didn't get the recognition they deserved. It went to the people who were in the front that you see in the pictures in the paper for the drivers. And they well deserved all their accolades, but it's nice to see some of the other people getting accolades today, owners, builders, announcers, and some other folks involved in the activity. So that's really great. Thank you very much.
And now it is my pleasure to welcome back to the stage near Hall of Fame President Rich Goucher to present Bob Cunha.
This is going to be long, but it gives me great pleasure because Bob did most of his work probably 10 miles away from where my home was. And we always, as kids, we always used to go to Chassis Dynamics and say, that's where Jeff Beaudine and Bob Cunha work. So it's pretty cool to install Bob. This is going to be long because Bob's history is immense. Bob was in high school and already a car guy when his dad said, "Can you imagine what a great car you could build if you became an engineer?" It was then that Bob decided to attend college, and it changed his life. Bob's subsequent experience as a chassis expert, car builder, and team manager has produced countless track records, race wins, and championships. His engineering expertise is unparalleled across a broad swath of New England motorsports. He has built winning road race, oval track, and drag racing cars. Bob even built American Olympic winning bobsleds. Bob is the founder and chief engineer at Chassis Dynamics, formerly in Waterbury. Ed Flunky Sr. brought him together with driver fabricator Bobby V, and they went into business together, creating some of the most beautiful, best handling cars of the period. Cunha V mounts comprised over half the field at Danbury Race Arena at one time. In 1979, the team joined with Jeff Beaudine to create Beaudine Chassis. Together, they designed and built the white Tornado number 99 for car owner Phil Taylor. The car only entered big, high-paying events piloted by Beaudine. The team won the series championship in New Smyrna, Florida, setting a track record that still stands today. They also won the Spring Sizzler at Stafford, races at Martinsville, North Wilkesboro, Spencer, Shangri-La, Oswego, Trenton, and Thompson. Bob estimates the car won 66% of its starts, and it never finished out of the top 3. Similar cars were built for Bug Stevens, Brett Beaudine, Ken Bouchard, Jim Champagne, and many others. That's quite the customer list. At the same time, concurrently with all this success, Cunha was building cars that were winning some of the biggest road races in the country. He built for Honda, Mazda, Chrysler, and some independents racing in SCCA and IMSA. Bob's road race cars have won over 20 championships. Bob's Mazda cars won the IMSA Manufacturers Championship 4 years in a row, with team drivers including Roger Maudville, Al Bacon, Amos Johnson, Lance Stewart, John Finger, and Dick Greer. In IMSA, Bob built 2 versions of his Dodge Racer, one front-wheel drive and one rear-wheel drive, to see how they'd go. They raced both. The rear-wheel drive car won the championship. The front-wheel drive came in second. Cunha Creations also won the 24 Hours of Daytona 4 years in a row. Bob worked for a time for near Hall of Fame driver Bob Sharp as his team engineer. One of Sharp's drivers was Paul Newman. Cunha became Newman's first crew chief. The following year, Cunha rebuilt the former Tullius Triumph TR6C production car, and Newman drove that car to a mid-70s SCCA national championship. As road racing lost popularity, Bob turned to manufacturing hot rods and pro stocks. Excuse me. Beaudine eventually bought and ran his own NASCAR Cup team, and Cunha was his engineer. The team won 10 pole awards and 5 Cup races, despite being very underfunded and understaffed. Bob developed the NASCAR pit road strategy, now used by every top team in road racing. This was comprised of planned pit stops at a defined schedule, whether the race was under green or yellow flag. The strategy was first used at Watkins Glen, and Beaudine won the show. The strategy is still widely used today. Later in his career, Bob teamed with Beaudine and Phil Kurtz to build winning Olympic bobsleds. The famous Night Train won the gold medal in 2010 in Canada. It was the first time a U.S. design-built 4-man sled had won gold since 1948. Night Train won silver in 2014. From 2002 to 2014, Cunha Olympic sleds won 2 gold, 3 silver, and 2 bronze medals in competition. Today, Bob and his wife reside in Bethany, Connecticut, and it gives me such great pleasure to introduce to you our first 2021 Near Hall of Fame inductee, Bob Cunha.
Well, I have 2 problems. I'm old notes. and I might even get emotional. Thank you for this honor. It means more to me than I can express in words. But I can at least offer thanks to some of the many people who helped me along the way, although I could never name them all. Foremost, I owe a debt of gratitude to my mother, father, my grandparents, my uncles, for providing me a loving home. Not only did they teach me decency and morals, but they also instilled in me the work ethic that has gotten me through the toughest times. Thanks especially to my dad. I had a near crippling physical disability as a child and spent a lot of time in a wheelchair. He taught me auto mechanics to keep me busy while the other kids were playing sports or running around the neighborhood. On weekends, he would take me to the Southern Connecticut short tracks, Danbury, Plainville, Savin Rock. By the age of 10, I was certain that I wanted to build race cars for a living. Of course, I had no idea how. Though he himself never completed high school, my dad encouraged me to go to college. I would argue with him, all I want to do is build race cars. A mechanical engineer, he said, should be able to build the best cars ever. That statement set my path to today. I went to Northeastern University, graduated, and immediately began working on a crew of a Danbury car driven by Marshall Smith. We won Rookie of the Year. That cemented my passion for auto racing, a passion that still continues after 50 years. I need to also offer my sincerest thanks to Bob Garbarino, Lenny Bowler, and Bobby Judkins, all of whom invited a young kid into their shops to see how the real guys did it. I'd like to thank Jimmy Bosco of Commercial Tire, who would have me into his office to share Italian sausage and the wisdom that racing-related things could be a business. I'd like to thank Eddie Flemke, who was the first big name to recognize that I, in his words, thought out of the box but showed promise. Eddie also introduced me to Pete Hamilton, Ray Stunkus, and Bob Melnick, who all made their living from racing. It was Eddie who hooked me up with Bobby V, who became my first and only business partner and the co-founder of Chassis Dynamics. He was an incredible partner and friend. He left this world too early. I still think of him. Excuse me. I'd like to thank Jimmy Ash. A lot of you knew him as Jimmy Cash. He was a great short track driver, and he schooled me in the art of oval track racing. I'd like to thank Bob Sharp, who gave me one of the biggest boosts in my overall career when he hired me as a full-time engineer of his 6-car Datsun factory team. Bob's professionalism and quest for perfection gave me an invaluable introduction to road racing. And a special thanks to Jeff Beaudine. We began as brutal competitors, but our mutual respect evolved into a friendship and intellectual partnership that has lasted since 1979. Jeff hired me to engineer his Exide Hoosier Cup team in the 90s. Then after the Winter Games in Albertville, France, he asked me to be his partner on an Olympic bobsled venture. Who would believe the success that became? I am deeply proud of our work. I keep a trophy from our last cup race in North Wilkesboro. We lapped the field. And I keep many photos in my office as a constant reminder of what we accomplished together. But finally, I must thank my wife, Karen. We've been married for 49 years, and her unwavering support of me and the crazy journey that has been my career has meant everything. You're the reason why all this has worked, and I'm forever grateful for your love and the family that we made together. So here I am, a happy old guy, still working 7 days a week. And each of them, I remember all of the drivers, mechanics, and fans who make up the sport that has filled my life and my heart. All I can offer in return is the promise that I will continue to pay forward the guidance and wisdom of the many teachers I've been blessed with, to answer honest questions that others ask of me, to mentor those who want to learn, and to honor the history of the sport. And I may even keep some sausage in my fridge. Thank you and God bless.
To present our next inductee, a gentleman I've been fortunate enough to work with at Thompson Motorsports Park, and when the NEMA Midgets come to Waterford, I bring up to the stage Speedway Illustrated Magazine, Carl Fredrickson.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Carl Fredrickson, and I'm the publisher of Speedway Illustrated. It certainly is a highlight for me to join each of you welcoming such a distinguished group of honorees today. And I have the distinct privilege to talk for a few minutes about one of racing's real gentlemen, Pete Falcone. You know, my training is as a journalist, and I learned from the best, Dick Berggren, Bones Borsier, Lou Boyd, many others, people in this room, and they all instilled an important aspect to being a journalist, and that is you have to know your subject. You got to get to know them. As such, I asked Pete to join me to dinner, where I'd get to learn a little bit more about the famous Falcone racing family. Pete said his father, John, was working on the race car the night that he got a call saying that it was time to bring his mother, Nancy, to the hospital because she had the important job of delivering Pete. Eventually, John owned and operated the Westboro Speedway and promoted Brookline, New Hampshire, and at Thompson, Connecticut. And while his brothers grew up to own, drive, build winning race cars, it was the colorful flags that always had young Pete's attention. By age 9 at Westboro, he was setting the flags in place before the event got started. You may, if you were at Westboro, you know that the flag stand, the starter's box, is about an inch from the speedway. So young Pete would scurry behind the chain link, and the warm-ups would get underway. But in 1965, Chief Starter Walt Faulkner had a brilliant idea: have the child flag a heat race. An 11-year-old Pete Falcone thought that was a genius idea. And amazingly, the race went without interruption or concern. Father John, however, happened to saunter out of the office and saw his young son flagging the races as the cars went whizzing by, and got pretty animated at the display in front of him. He promptly turned his son around and sent him in the other direction, to the announcer's tower. Pete didn't like that at all, because Pete had been flagging the street races around for kids on their bicycles around their Southborough, Massachusetts home, and he thought flagging was his future. But when he did go up there, he joined veteran announcer Bill Welch. And he took hold of that microphone and talked his way right into this Hall of Fame. Mr. Welch was perfect for Pete. He hung on his mentor's every word. Among them, Welchie told the young charge, avoid making villains out of people. And remember, racetracks don't have corners, they have turns. Pete's brilliance with the microphone was clear early on. He was working in radio before he even graduated from high school. And at the local radio station, Pete said, I was just mostly hanging around doing light gigs, trying to find a way to be an asset. But soon he was off to college. And of course, he pursued a career, a degree in communications. But he got a call And the call was from the radio station. They had a full-time job that opened up, and they offered it to Pete. He said, well, you know what? I'll just skip this college stuff for now, and as soon as this runs out, I'll go back to school. Well, the school is still waiting. Pete became a popular DJ in Boston, and he now owns and operates 5 radio stations in New Hampshire and Maine. Weekends, however, have always been for racing. In those early years, Pete called the action at Westboro and Seekonk alongside Wally Saliba, and he also called races at Stafford, again with his mentor Welch and Mike Joy. So if you've been to a race in New England in the past 5 decades, you've probably heard his voice. He's the traveling announcer of NEMA for 19 years, and he's been calling races for those in the grandstands at New Hampshire Motor Speedway since the mid-1990s. That 25 years might make him the longest tenured employee at that track. And remember that station that Pete used to hang around as a teenager? Jean McGrath worked there. She and the rest of her family would go to Westboro to watch the races. And that's where her young son, David, fell in love with the sport. Today, we know him as the Executive Vice President and General Manager of New Hampshire Motor Speedway. And there's no doubt that Pete's race call helped cultivate McGrath's love of motorsport, like so many in this room and at racetracks around New England. That's what Pete brings to the announcer's role. He's told me the announcer is the line between fans and what's happening on the track. His job is to make sure people have a story to tell from their day at the races, especially if it's a first-time visitor. Yet for all his experience and expertise in all facets of racing, I'll bet your experience with Pete is a lot like mine, because I cannot ever recall him complaining or criticizing a racetrack. So I asked him about that at the dinner. And he said, they didn't hire me as a consultant. So I thought that was pretty good. But there was something else from that dinner that he told me that I just got to share. And he said this quite casually, I might add. He said, you know, I never wanted to see him crash. So wait, what? Isn't that announcer catnip? Isn't that when tumbling chassis and bent body panels, isn't that what drives these announcers? Maybe some, but not Pete Falcone. That simple sentence, I never wanted to see him crash. That, to me, is his essence. This brilliant performer, Pete Falcone, is a consummate gentleman. You know, I never wanted to see him crash. This is what made Pete Falcone a tremendous announcer and so worthy of his induction into the Hall today. His focus and enthusiasm for auto racing was on the competition, not the carnage. You know, I never wanted to see him crash. So how about a big hand for Pete Falcone as he comes to the podium and joins a near Hall of Fame in perpetuity.
Thank you, Carl. I really appreciate it. I'm a big fan. His magazine comes in the mail, and before even dinner, I sit down and get through about 3/4 of it. I'm thrilled to have him induct me into the Hall of Fame. It's so hard for me to fathom because all my heroes in racing all these years are in this Hall of Fame. It's truly amazing to me that I'm receiving this honor. Truly the pinnacle of my life. What's unusual about this, though, is when I'm announcing races, usually everybody's facing the other way looking at the racetrack. So if you don't mind all turning around, this will be a little easier for me to do because normally I'm looking at the back of everybody's head. But I need to begin by thanking NEAR, nominating selection committees, all those involved with New England antique racers that do just a fine job of preserving the history of the sport that we grew up with and love so dearly, not just this event, but all year long. I especially want to thank my wife, Patricia, for allowing me to do all this racing from April to October on Saturday nights and Sundays, and sometimes, in the case of Loudon, 3 days away from home for the races. She knew my lifelong passion for the sport when we met, and she's been very supportive. Thank you, Patricia. I need to thank my family, my full family involvement in this racing. My late brothers, John and Rick, who are here in spirit today. My brother Jimmy, who along with nephews John and Jamie, all have been drivers, race car builders, owners, and mechanics, and I've learned so much about that side of racing from those guys. I need to thank all the announcers that I get to work with when traveling to various tracks throughout the season now that I do all the races for the Northeastern Midget Association. My colleagues and fellow inductee John Spence from Lee, Dave Sutherland from Monadnock, Joe Koss at Loudon, Ken Minot at Wiscasset, who I'm happy to see here today, Tyler Morse at Star, Kevin Boucher at Seekonk, Dave Barabal at the Waterford Speed Bowl, and especially Matt Buckler, who I'm sorry he wasn't here today as the usual MC of this event. I work alongside Matt doing the announcing duties at Thompson, and I've learned a lot from him too. Like, for instance, a 2-car length lead is the length of a school bus. I think he likes to use that phrase all the time. I also want to thank those legendary announcers that I've had the pleasure of working with in the past, and proud to have shared the announcers booth with, guys that I learned a lot from in racing, including the great Ken Squire at Loudon, Mike Joy when we worked together at Stafford, Jack Arute, Ben Dodge, Al Robinson, even all the way back to my beginning days with Wally Saliba at Seekonk. I was always very attentive to the advice they had to offer, and it was a thrill to work with all those legends throughout my years in the sport. But the two people that I really need to thank the most are actually the most influential in my racing career, and they're already in the Hall of Fame. My father, John Falcone, who was inducted into the Hall in 2007, and then from as far back as I can remember, I was at my father's side throughout the mid to late 60s, through the 70s and into the 80s while he owned and operated Westboro and was part of the promoting group at Thompson and Brookline, New Hampshire. I remember going to so many meetings with he and his partners and hearing firsthand about the business and the do's and don'ts of running a racetrack. I really learned the promoting side of racing and just business in general from those guys. And I was my father's sidekick through many seasons of racing. And when he kind of turned the reins over to me in the 80s to pretty much manage the Westboro Speedway, I was most prepared, thanks to the man they called Murph. And he's been, of course, the biggest influence to me. But the second huge influence in my career was the legendary Bill Welch, who was inducted into the Hall in 1998. Carl alluded to that. If you didn't have the pleasure of knowing Welchie, you missed a big part of New England racing history. There's a reason why they called him the Dean of New England Auto Racing. He was part of that promoting team with my father and the other guys and brought a sense of fairness and logic from the competitor's point of view. He knew what worked and what didn't, but he never spoke with a raised voice or an angry word. One of the nicest men you would ever know and a mentor to many, several that are in this room here today. But when he wasn't working behind the scenes at these tracks, he was in the forefront of them as an announcer at Westboro, Thompson, Stafford, and Norwood. I was lucky enough to be seated next to Welchie in the Westboro announcers booth just about every Saturday night of every summer in the mid to late 1960s. And when you sit in the stands at a race, it's rare that you hear the announcer once the green flag drops. But even back then, and way before these races were recorded or streamed on the internet, the announcer, it was still calling every part of the race as if everyone could hear him. So being next to Welchie for all those nights, I got to hear his call word for word. And I learned that the show was only as thrilling as the announcer made it. It was part mechanical information, part expert opinion, part historical, part inside information from knowing the drivers and the pit crews. It was all about being that link between what was happening on the track and the people who paid to watch it. And that's the most important part of what we do, educate the spectators. And I know my colleagues from the announcers' booths all over New England that are here today will agree. And I'll leave you with this thought. There are people like us that go to the races every week and have done so for many years. We know what's happening on the racetrack most of the time, but we're a fading bunch, unfortunately. It's fairly obvious that attendance is shrinking at racetracks everywhere. Any good promoter will tell you that to survive, he needs in the seats as much as he needs cars in the pits. So therefore, we got to make some new fans. And the announcer plays a big role in that. If the first-time fan leaves there not knowing what he or she just saw, you know, what the difference is between the cars, what the flags mean, why they line up the way they do, why they got penalized, what they get for winning, even knowing the drivers' names and hometowns. If that first fan goes away uneducated, they're never coming back. So they'll put up with the paint-peeling grandstands, the $6 hamburger, the layer of dust on their car from the gravel parking lot, if they leave there knowing what they saw and they're excited about it. Because if they learn enough to go home or go to work and tell somebody about racing and speak it like they know it, not only are they coming back, but they're bringing somebody with them. And that's our job. I know I do it every time I open the mic, and I know my colleagues do too. So if you're a promoter, driver, car owner, crew member, give the announcer all the information that you can that he can share with the fans. Anything to help educate the first-timers, the new fans to that racetrack about the sport. We're the link between the show and the spectators, and we're out to make new fans every time we go into the booth. And you know, we do need a lot of new fans. Again, thank you, Near. Thank you to all the announcers I've worked with, everybody that I've had the pleasure of dealing with in this long racing career. And thank you all very much. This is truly a great honor. God bless you all. Thank you.
And Pete, I can't believe you didn't use phrases like the top 6 cars can fit inside a donut hole or some of other Matt Bucklerisms. But once again, Pete Falcone, ladies and gentlemen. Next up, I bring the announcer for the Monadnock Speedway, Dave Sutherland, to introduce Dave Gans.
Well, good afternoon. I can remember being in this room about 10 years ago. Remember that October Halloween storm? We came here for a show, and there wasn't a person in the building. There was no power on anywhere around Westford. It was such a pleasant drive coming down this afternoon in sunny skies and no snow. Back in 1971, Monadnock Speedway opened as a dirt track. In 1972, they kind of cobbed it together and it became a half asphalt track. In 1973, we put a brand new surface on it, and things changed a lot. The first thing was Dave Grants showed up with the gorgeous little deuce coupe. Most of us in the booth were convinced that his right rear tire was 40 inches wide because he could handle the track very nicely. In the ensuing years, because I was newer racing, I didn't know his history. I just knew he was really good at Monadnock. In his first season, he won 10 times. His first win came on May 13th, which was pretty much the beginning of the season. He went on to win 9 more races that year, and that put him in the category of one of the drivers who's had the most wins ever. That didn't stop with 1973. By 1976, he had upped that to 12 wins in a season. In 1973, 76, and 78, in addition to the 3 wins that are posted in our program book, he picked up 3 more championships at Monadnock. By the time the sportsman division had been ended, he had 43 victories in less than 10 years. He came back with a late model and won 2 more. So within the first 10 years of Monadnock Speedway, he was the winningest driver in Speedway history. There's only one other person who won more after that, and we inducted him in 2012, Punky Karen. Over the years, we've done a lot of interviews. After a while, as a track announcer, you have to find new things to do to interview the guy who just won the last 3 races and is going to win the next 4. I remember one really warm July day, and it came to mind when Pete Newsom had called me and said, would you please induct Dave? And the reason you're inducting Dave is because every picture I've seen of him, you're in it. Well, I'm an ex-newsman, so I had to fact check that. And I went back through my pictures, and I went through all the pictures that were being posted by Joe Burrell from Speedway Scene that had races in the 70s. I was not the only first person. Our late starter, Jim Hanks, was always the guy in Victory Lane with him. So I'm glad to be here to represent Jim since he's passed away some years ago. One particular hot July race, by the time I got down from the tower and onto the track to do the interview, Dave was out sweating like a stuck pig, soaked, fire suit rolled down to his waist, sitting on the Nerf bar. And he said, I'm fill in the blanks pooped. I think probably that was one of the very rare in racing world Nerf bar interviews we have ever done. Because he sat there and I sat there and we did the interview there. We did not stand up. And I still have a picture somewhere in the file of that guy sitting there with a checkered flag in his hand and just dripping wet. He's not quite so bad today. I'm glad to know. And so, having reminded you of what he can be like when it's really hot and sweaty, I'd like to have you meet him today. Will you please welcome to the class of 2021 for the near Hall of Fame, Dave Grants.
Oh, I don't know if I ever thought I'd be wearing this suit standing upright. I thought I'd probably be laying down. I know I had a great career in the race car, and I've got to thank my wife and my family for that. Persevering over 23 years of racing. Bring me to tears today to see these friends and relatives and people that have come here to support me. Mainly my right-hand man in the pits for 23 years, Charlie Herrick, that came to my house 2 to 3 nights a week to work on the race car. And then we started racing in New Hampshire, and we met Punky Bellinger. And Punky's another story. He lived in, well, it wasn't Goshen. He lives there now. But he used to drive to my house a couple of nights a week anyway. 100-mile trip each way from his house. And then go there on the weekends to tow one of the race cars. My success lays in the hands of those two guys for being there for me. I want to thank my family, like I said, for 23 years of persevering over me. And I want to thank my late dad. He was my number one fan. He used to go to the Pines and Hudson Speedway. And when the feature race started, he would light up a Dexter cigar. And he'd smoke that till the end of the feature race, even when it was burning his lips. And then, if I won, he'd toss his hat in the air. I'm so proud that he was my dad. It's ironic, a couple of things that happened to me is four of us that being nominated tonight had a big part in what I did. I owned a race car in the early 60s, but I never drove it. And somebody would wreck it every week. And I got sick of doing that. I talked to my dad, my wife Shirley, and said, I've either got to drive these myself or give it up. So I called Andy Cody. Andy was a guy that when I got out of high school, after school, I went to his shop almost every day to watch him and Ollie Silver build race cars. So Andy was in Littleton, New Hampshire, and I called him and I said, I'm going to try to do this myself, drive it. He said, come up here and I'll give you a race car. Well, he didn't give it to me, but I have a race car for you. And I went to Littleton, picked up the race car, and I went to Westboro Speedway, where Pete was probably announcing at that time. And the car didn't quite fit Westboro's rules. But Andy had it painted Doyle Brothers, Montpelier, Vermont. And they said, this guy came all the way from Montpelier to race here. So we're going to let him race. My first race, driving myself, I finished third at Westboro Speedway. And that was the start of all my racing. And So Pete probably announced that race, and we've been friends from all the time that I did run at Westboro Speedway. The ironic thing was Andy gave me that car. And the second honoree tonight, I lived in Lowell when I had the first race cars. And this 11, 12-year-old kid would come up to the fence behind my yard night after night and watch me work on the race car. Tonight he's an honoree. That 12-year-old kid with blonde hair was John Spence. I truly appreciate Russell Woods nominating me for this honor, and I truly thank the NEAR organization for giving me this honor. Thank you.
And now I welcome to the stage April May Preston Elms. She will present Jim Haynes.
First thing I got to say is I was corrected when I got back to the table. Bentley Warren, Warren Bentley, I don't know. I had both the names, just in the wrong order. Sorry about that. All right. Jim Haynes started off as a Yale-educated engineer. He was an outstanding road racer on the national and international level, winning 2 national championships, Formula 3 in 1959 and Formula Junior in 1963. While Jim had a lucrative driving career, his true claim to fame was as the owner-manager of Lime Rock in Lakeville, Connecticut. Jim was a majority stockholder of an investment group that rescued the struggling facility. From 1964 to 1984, using his mediation skills, needed to handle the constant bickering between the competing SCCA and IMSA series, his promotional skills, and his stellar relationship with motorsports media, Jim put Lime Rock on the map. During his tenure, he made Lime Rock a track of national importance, hosting many major series and special events. In May of 1967, he held an SCCA Trans Am race, bringing in 2 famous race drivers, Peter Revson in a Budmore Mustang, who beat Mark Donohue in a Penske Camaro. In Haynes' words, this was the turning point that took Lime Rock from being a club track to a major road racing destination. Haynes brought SCCA's Trans Am series for Detroit's pony cars, open-wheel Formula 5000 cars, and IMSA, Can-Am, and GT series to the Connecticut road course. The likes of Parnelli Jones, hopefully I'll get these all right, Al Holbert, Peter Gregg, John Paul Jr., Bob Tullis, Sam Posey, and George Fulmer all won on the track dubbed a Crooked Little Mile. In the spring of 1972, Haynes secured rides for oval track famous favorites Bug Stevens and dirt ace Will Cagle, garnering a ton of media attention, with the win going to Formula. He was in that race as well. The grounds were full of short track race fans and media members who were at the track for the first time. Wild popularity followed for years. Motorsports writer Bones Bouchard stated that without the vision of Jim Haynes, Lime Rock would have closed long before these legends got to race there. In 1984, another group of investors headed by Skip Barber purchased the track and did major renovations. Haynes moved on working with SCCA and then Road America in Atlanta, Georgia, until retiring in 2000. Jim Haynes with his wife Tony live in Tampa, Florida. He's 88 years old and both live in an assisted living facility, and they could not be with us today. Can we please have a round of applause for Jim as we place his plaque with the rest of our Hall of Fame recipients?
Next up, I'd like Skip Matsack to return to the stage as he will present Jeff Horn.
79 years old, 60 years of a machine shop and 60 years of racing. I'm afraid I didn't hear the introduction. I'm here today to talk about Jeff Horn and his wife Carmen. I read the pamphlet today. They did a terrific job. And I take from the New England Antique Racers Creed to honor outstanding people in the field of automobile racing and develop and foster knowledge of the history of automobile racing in New England. Take a look at the Jeff Horn page. it does a pretty good job of describing Jeff. However, as in most cases, we have some extra stories to tell. Let's start with all of the people that are sitting with Jeff Horn and came with Jeff Horn. Would you please stand up? Not bad, huh? So he's got a following. You can sit down. Jeff is from Vermont. He tells stories about loving to go to the fairgrounds and watch the midgets and the sprints. And he and his buddies all week talking about it, how they were going to race. He talks about meeting his wife, Carmen, whose father was a racer. He was known as Cornfield Rock because he made a few detours out into the cornfield at the track. So Jeff meets this beautiful young lady who has a history in the sport, who straightens nails for her promoter uncle at a penny a nail, whose father has a flat top, flathead coupe, and they start to go out. And of course, they get married. Jeff is a wounded Vietnamese veteran, and he served with honor. That's very important. I met Jeff racing at Star Speedway. Now, Jeff's grandfather raced at the first Vanderbilt Cup in Long Island. Now, there's a message in the story because the grandfather later on had a taxi business. And we strongly think that Jeff learned his traffic skills on the track from his grandfather driving in New York City in the cabs. Laugh. Jeff ran a super modified and did very well. I had the honor of introducing him to Joan and Bay Hayes. Bay was an insurance guy, he didn't know which end of the screwdriver to hang on to, honestly. Loved racing, had a midget, and I thought, here's a pair that a full house can't beat. Bay's organizational skills and Jeff's mechanical skills ended up running NEMA, and basically they went as fast as they wanted while the rest went as fast as they could. He joined the DMA a few years ago, which is the USAC Dirt Midget Association up at Bear Ridge. 76 years old, the guy wins a feature. I mean, he's won a lot of features, but can you imagine 76 years old and he's won a feature? Somebody scribbled on these notes. I hear the audience cackling, and Jeff was quick to help out people. When Charlie Gunther and Scott Viets heard that Jeff was being inducted and that I would be here, they immediately asked if they could join. Why? Because they were first-time racers in NEMA, and Jeff was the first to step up and help. And they ended up being the first female winner at Seekonk. So I guess he did help. Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great honor to introduce to you a family man, a Vietnam veteran, a hard racer, and I think much more to come. I give you, and please stand up, a large welcome for Jeff Horn. Now we're talking. All right, here comes the stories. He promised me he's going to make people blush. He promised me he's going to stand up here until they pull the plug on the microphone. Go at it, Jeff.
Well, I don't know if there's much I can say. I think Skip pretty well covered everything. But I am totally honored to be picked for this award by the Near Hall of Fame, which I didn't expect. And to be inducted into a Hall of Fame with people that were my heroes. And I thought the world of it. to be mentioned with them is just honor of its own. And you know, there's a lot of things that go along with racing. All I ever wanted to do as a kid, probably from 6 years old, was be a race car driver. My wife was laughing at me. I said there was 4 things in life I wanted. 1, to be a race car driver. 2, to be an Army guy. 3, to be a garage man. And 4, to be a cowboy. Well, I got 3 of them. I'm still running my garage, and I'm working on the cowboy thing. But, hey, I don't know how that's going to go. But anyways, nobody does this by themselves. I would like all the guys that helped me, that came here, and they know who they are, to stand up, please. Because without them, I never would have able to do anything what I did. And that is really great. And also, Skip mentioned my wife of, I think, like 54 years. And I did meet her, and, you know, a lot of people thought I just wanted to get to her father's race car, but, you know, which worked out real well. But it's, you know, she's hung by me, and you know what racing takes out of a marriage and goes on. People know that. Anyways, I am so honored to be asked into this Hall of Fame. And that's about what I got to say. Thank you.
And Skip, I'll excuse you missing my introduction because I have 2 women in my life who'll tell you I don't listen to what they tell me. So, next, I'd like to introduce Hall of Fame chassis builder Riley Lindblad to present Dave Lynn.
Well, I've been racing for 50 years, and I've known Dave for 50 years. And I was thinking about it last night. What stands out that Dave, with Dave Lynn so much with me? And I figured it out. I gave him more money over the years in racing than anybody else in the sport. But no, seriously, Dave was a hell of a racer in the late 60s and early 70s. He coupled with an old friend of mine, Tom Dunn, and ravaged the Pro 4 modified division. And he's also been an outstanding entrepreneur in the racing industry, bringing the Goodyear tire to the modified ranks and American racers to the late models and pro stocks. So what can you say? But the biggest word that I can think of when you mention Dave Lynn is successful. And that's Dave Lynn. Ladies and gentlemen, here he is, Dave Lynn.
Oh, I got a lot to say, and kind of bashful to speak in front of people. First of all, I want to thank NERA for all their work that they do. I never realized, how much it went into this, and really hadn't paid much attention, but I sure will now. Second, I'd like to thank Rolly, for putting my name in and getting me on the, to the committee so that I would have a chance to do this. And his daughter Robin, who actually did all the legwork and provided the input to, my racing career. And there is some other special people that I'd like to thank before I go on, because I'm afraid I might forget. One of them is, a lot of you might know, is Dick Demick. He's not here. He's up in the Pocono Mountains. He's the general manager of Penske Tire and Competition Tire East, Penske Shock. When I started with Goodyear in 1973, they came down with their equipment from Reading, Pennsylvania, helped me set up, and he stood beside me thick and thin through all the years with a modified tour. And without his help and Penske's help, I would have never been successful. There was a lot of people that wanted that Goodyear deal more than me, and a lot more with deeper pockets for sure. But anyway, I was brought up on a farm in big farm, 80-acre farm in Norfolk, Massachusetts. I was born in 1942 during the war. And the farm was pretty well defunct because the hurricane in '38 had tore down the barn. And my dad had to work in the shipyards for he left at 4 or 5 in the morning, got home at dark at night. But we had a great family. I had 2 older brothers, and we had big fields, and they had cars when they were like 13 or 14. So I learned to drive when I was probably 9 years old. So their friends used to come over through the woods, and I'd ride around with them and race. And then at 13 years old, I got my first, we call them woods rods. So we were racing around the fields, and then I guess I was about 12 or 13, and we begged our father. He was not an automotive guy, he was an electrician. And I don't think he could check oil in his truck, but we begged him, and he took us to Norwood Arena. And boy, that just changed my life. I mean, from then on till I went into the service right after high school, I don't think we missed a Saturday night at Norwood Arena. I spent 3 years in the Army, and I got out and I tried my hand. I ran a few street stocks one year. I think maybe I got out in the Army in 1963. I think at 65 I had a street stock at Norwood. I remember I won the feature one night, and they jacked up the car, and both wheels, one wheel, and it wouldn't turn. So I had welded the spider gears together, and they DQ'd me. So, but then fortunately, General Motors in Framingham was putting on a second shift. I was dubbing around working at a gas station, not really doing too much, and I really wanted to race. So I got the job at General Motors, I think it was the beginning of 1965, as a forklift operator. So fortunately, I didn't have to work on the assembly line. I had ran a forklift when I was in the service. And I saved my money. And in '67, I had a back surgery, so they gave me some time off. So I had met Harp Harrington. All of you know, the former Hall of Famer, great guy, a real good car builder. Through a mutual friend, and I started, he worked at, he was working with Mike's Truck Stop, and he was basically just working on the race car. The M2, you probably all remember that, at Norwood Arena in Thompson. So I helped him and went to the races with him every Saturday night at Norwood, and then Sundays at Thompson. And I learned a lot from him. He's a great guy and a real good chassis builder. In 1969, I had enough of working in a factory, even though I didn't really do a heck of a lot. And I opened up a little repair shop and started selling passenger tires, and I got some credit from the Goodyear wholesale place locally. I built myself a late model Tiger car, and I raced at Norwood. The first year, 1969, we raced at what they call a late model Tiger. And fortunately, we ran the same big 12-inch M&H slicks that the mods ran. So we used to buy the takeoffs. I remember buying from Johnny Thompson. They'd only run them once, $25. You know, we put tires on a car and could run them for 2 or 3 weeks. So we went, it took me a little while to get going, a little overheating problems and stuff like that. But that first year, between Stafford and Thompson and Norwood, we won 7 features. Then I started venturing up to Vermont and Thunder Road and Catamount and Plattsburgh, and actually got over to Senior, Quebec, and ran with Dave Dion and the Dragon Brothers, John Paul Cabana. And I won a couple of races. I think I won at Thunder Road and Catamount maybe once or twice. In the 1971 or 2, Goodyear came out. There was a local Goodyear tire store up there with service in Catamount. And if you didn't put on 4 new Goodyears at about 270 or 80 bucks, you weren't going to finish in the top 5. And I always ran good, always in the money somewhere. And it kind of gave me a wake-up call. So I had, in the meantime, before that, I sold some McCreary's. I had met Joe Jacobs, and McCreary just got into the tire business. So I was selling them, and a friend of mine, Buddy Cook, was selling them at Norwood. And I used to take a little trailer behind my ramp truck up to Vermont, and I had 2 or 3 customers, and it was really, helping my tire bill. So anyway, I saw the handwriting on the wall. I couldn't win the way I was racing with the finance, and what racer doesn't want to step behind the wheel and know that he's got a shot at the feature? So I had a good friend that knew the New England district manager of Goodyear, which is located in Needham, Mass. So he set me up an appointment. I sat in his office, we talked. He called Competition Tire, Roger Penske's guy, which was Dick Demick. He was great. We talked. I was already set up with some credit with Goodyear from my little tire and garage in Norfolk. So all of a sudden, things took off at Seekonk, at Star, and I think it was 73 or 74 at the Spring Sizzler. Goodyear mounted their first attempt to get into the modified division, which was great. And so that took off. By 75, 76, I think we had 3/4 of the field. And it went on like that till 1980, 81. New England Drivers and Owners Association was established, being Dick Armstrong and that bunch. And they didn't like they claimed we were having tire races rather than race car races, which was maybe true. Obviously if you had, the modified division was always open competition. If you didn't have, the best tire, they go over to the other truck and get tires from you. So anyway, I was kind of bummed out, and because I knew we weren't going to race modifieds in 1982. I had a few personal problems at the same time. So I decided I was going to I had a retail. Meanwhile, going through this, I built a retail store in Norfolk about a mile from where I grew up. So I was busy anyway, and I had my weekend guys that worked for me, and they wanted to go to the races, so I kind of stayed home and let them go. Then in the spring of '82, Marvin sues. He sues Hoosier, and he sued the 4 racetracks were Riverside, Thompson, Stafford, and Seekonk. Well, anyway, right away, Riverside and Thompson dropped out of the lawsuit, so there was 2 tracks left, and Nedoc and Hoosier. So they had adopted a economy $95 Hoosier 13-inch tire. But the problem with Goodyear and myself was that we didn't have a 13-inch tire, so we had to develop a 13-inch tire. And in the meantime, I'll probably, I think I'll go to my racing and then kind of come back to what happened starting in '82 with the racing, because my racing career was a lot shorter than my tire career. And so 1982, Tom Dunn, which we were good friends, and he had a NASCAR modified for years, and I'd driven for him once at Seekonk in '73 when he first got into oval track racing. He comes down to my shop in June, and he says, "Dave, I want you to drive my Pro 4, my mini modified," he says. I said, "Well, I don't like mini modified. It sounds like a toy." So anyway, I agree. I says, "Give me a month to get in shape." I was a little overweight, probably drinking a little heavy over this. I was pretty upset about the tire deal, because I really had a love for the modifieds. I mean, I'd become good friends with Richie Evans, Jeff Beaudine, and all the top dog guys, because I sold them tires, and I was always there till the end of the races. If guys wanted to bring tires back, we always took them back, and so we were the last ones always to leave the pits. And it's kind of like family to me. So anyway, make a long story short, I says, "I'll be ready in July, Tom." So we start racing the Pro 4 at Westboro. I think we won at Westboro. Then they had that Bandit series. We went to New Egypt. We won 50-lapper. We won that. Next night we went to Islip, 50-lapper. We won that. A couple weeks later we went to Shangri-La, ran a 50-lap Can-Am race. We won that. Went to Stafford. They had the Race of Champions for us, 2 50-lappers. I won the first one. Dave Humphreys won the second one. And then I won the World Series at Thompson. Well, meanwhile, during '82, Richie Jeff Beaudine had gone south. Richie was our guy, and we tire tested. In fact, I was at Shangri-La testing the day that I was supposed to be at New Egypt running the mini-mod for Tom, so I had to hustle over there after our testing. So we were pretty successful with the Pro 4, and then in 1983, I won 9 out of 18 features at Westboro Speedway, the track championship, and the NEMA championship. We also won races at Thompson. I know we won the World Series again that year. So we moved on, and then Westboro closed in 1985, and that was really a heartbreaker for me. I waited, I worked hard all week, and with the Goodyear tire store and plus the tire sales, and it just broke my heart when Westboro closed. I just waited from one Saturday night to the next. I waited just to run Westboro Speedway. It was just so much fun. And anyway, we went to Seekonk in 1985, won a couple of races. I bought a rolling chassis of a super late model, a Midwest car was in the Midwest. And I got a Hutter motor from my buddy Richie Evans. And we went and I said, I'm going to run some of those Budweiser Showdowns. So we went to Stafford, and Dale Earnhardt wins the first one. I come in second. Tim Richmond was third. We get in the second one. Dale and I start in the back, and I watch Earnhardt. Somebody wrecked going down the back stretch of Stafford, and all of a sudden, here's Earnhardt. He comes out in about 10th place. So anyway, he won the second one. I think I come in 7th or 8th. A couple of weeks later, we go to Thompson, and Dale's not there. And I won them both. So that was one of my real highlights of my life. And 1986, the spring of 1986, we went down to New Smyrna. We had 6 events scheduled, and I won 3 of them. And then in 1987, we didn't. 86, yeah, we won a couple of races at Seekonk, and I think we won a couple at Thompson. And then the spring of the winter of '87, we went to New Smyrna. Tom had a brand new car, and I couldn't get it around. We threw everything at it, and I couldn't get it around. It wasn't like I forgot how to drive over the winter. So anyway, Leo Cleary, which had driven many times for Tom and his NASCAR modified, I says, Tom, and this is all friendly. I wasn't angry or anything. And I says, Tom, why don't you put Leo in it? I mean, if he can't get this thing around, he'll help you a lot more than I can with his experience. So anyway, Leo drove the car. I drove once more for Tom. I think it was the World Series at Thompson, as Leo was driving Roley's Pro Stock at the time, and I think they had a commitment, so he asked me to drive. So I drove, and we started 25th. I got up and took the lead, and then we overheated. And that was the last time I drove for Tom. In fact, it was I think 86 was the last time I won a race. I bought in 88, I sold my super late model. In fact, I sold it to Bobby Santos Jr. and my super late model. I didn't want to race that anymore. I bought a Grand National car from Jimmy Spencer. I just wanted to try. They were going to build a brand new super speedway at New Hampshire. So I wanted to try it. So I bought a Grand National car from Jimmy Spencer. I think Ronnie Bouchard came in second in Daytona with that car. He had a Hutter motor in it. So I went down to Rockingham, and I wrecked it. And then I went up to Dover, and I bounced off the wall. Had the Darlington stripe at Dover a couple of times. I mean, we were going 165 miles an hour, and I'd never been that fast in my life. But anyway, I went to New Hampshire a couple of times, and I didn't like it. I was kind of disappointed. I was looking for a big Thompson or a Dover, and it was a flat track, and I really could never get around flat. I could never get around Seekonk. I went to Oxford a couple of times. I could never get around. I even used to disconnect my 4-barrel to see if I could, feather the throttle a little bit, but I guess my foot was either up or down. So that was basically the end of my racing career, which was great. I'll go back to 1980, 82, and 83, and tire testing with Richie and getting back into the modifieds. And it was a great run. I mean, I tire tested with the greats, Mike Stefanik, Mike McLaughlin, Brett Beaudine, the Fuller brothers, Steve Parks, and really enjoyed my life. Eventually, I gave probably, I think it was in the late 80s when I became a McCreary distributor. Commercial Tire went out of business, so they asked me to be the New England distributor. Well, Bob Bear had the NASCAR North and Oxford Plains, and they wanted me to do the rest. And I said, I got to call Goodyear and get their blessings, because Dick Demick, and he had helped me so much through the years. And Dave says, because Goodyear was having their problems, their pricing wasn't compatible to Hoosier, so we were losing short track business. And I called Phil Homer, field director at Goodyear, and he said, yeah, go ahead, Dave. So we got the distributorship for American Racer, and it really went well. At one point, I had probably 75–80% of the business in all of New England. And in 2000, the modified, Hoosier came on the scene in the modified heavy around probably 1995, 1996. And they were very competitive. And we tire tested all the time, trying to beat them. And in 2001, NASCAR says, we're going to go to a one-tire rule like it's on the rest of our series. And so the Hoosier guys that were on the FOCs, which means freebies, and Goodyear guys, they all complained to NASCAR and said, we, going to put us, Goodyear and Hoosier, they put a lot of money into this tour. So in the spring, NASCAR changes their mind and they say, we're going to leave it open for one more year. Well, Goodyear had taken their budget, what I'm assuming is probably between $750,000 and $1 million budget they had between testing and all the scrap tires that they had to throw away if they didn't work, and all the returns that we didn't use at a race. So they had allocated their budget to a different series. So we bowed out, and that was the end of me and Goodyear with a modified tour. And I still had a really good business with the American Racer, but I loved the modifieds, and I made such great friends. Like I said, Richie and I became very good friends, and with among probably all the modified guys. I had so many great experiences, all the races, from all the short tracks. I can name on less than one hand anybody that beat me out of a tire, and that's the truth. That's what kind of people racers are. I mean, it might be next year, they come over, they need, Dave, I owe you for a set of tires. I says, no problem. They pay it from last year, but great, I was so thrilled. And I don't think there's a lot of people that can say they made their living, and a good living, in a sport that they really loved. And I truly did. And I really had a lot of other great experiences. One time, Richie, I had an old motorhome, and Richie says, I need you to bring one of my cars down to New Smyrna for Speed Weeks. And we always went to New Smyrna Speed Weeks. It was the best racing anybody could get for a $30, $20 ticket back then. They had 30 or 40 super late models from the Midwest, and they had 25, 35 modifieds from New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, New England. It was great racing. And that year, it was 79, I believe. Oh, I'm sorry. Anyway, that year Richie won the modified 200, and I was helping in the pit areas. And I want to thank you all for coming, and I'm sorry I got carried away.
Next up, I would like to introduce the public relations man, John Mayne, to present to Kelly Moore.
Our next inductee embarked on his illustrious racing career in 1977. It was a sportsman's race at Wiscasset Speedway, and it was an eventful day for sure. It wasn't his first trip to victory lane. It was actually his first trip into the wall. He also totaled a car and went back to work. Kelly would spend the next few years racing in a limited series at Wiscasset and Unity Speedways throughout Maine. While the competition was tough, it was a learning experience for Kelly, and his career became to be established. But still, along the way, it was a hard road and sometimes a difficult challenge. For the 1981 season, Kelly shifted his focus to Oxford Plains Speedway with a newly built chassis by Deck Glines. He was all in and focused. He had to be, as the competition was amongst the best around. He worked hard and it paid off with the 1984 Oxford Track Championship. He followed it up the next year by winning Oxford's Triple Crown. In 1986, with a fresh coat of asphalt applied to his home track of Beach Ridge Motor Speedway, Kelly Moore, the hometown hero, took the checkers. In 1986, he also ran the ACT Tour. And in 1987, with NASCAR debuting the NASCAR Busch North Series, Kelly would become a fixture on the series for the next 17 years. Be it a standalone or combination event, Kelly Moore and his impeccably clean and well-prepared race cars were ready for the challenge. As Kelly will attest, and as many of the competitors in this room, the Busch North Series was the epitome of stock car racing in the Northeast. Moore's accomplishments on the Busch North Series are renowned. The all-time leader in starts, wins, poles in a season, money won, top fives, top tens. And in 1995, Kelly Moore earned the Busch North Series championship. Today, nearly 44 years after that mishap at Wiscasset Speedway, it's my honor and privilege to introduce your 2021 New England Auto Racing Hall of Fame inductee, Kelly Moore.
Thank you. Thank you to everyone. As you look around the room and see so many familiar faces, it makes me proud to be standing here and celebrating with all of you. I'd like to thank the NEA board members for this recognition. It's a real honor. It's also an appreciative of this organization continues its dedication to the auto racing as it does. Congratulations to all the other inductees here today with me. And thank you, John Mayne, for that introduction. I really appreciate it. You were a big part of Moore Racing along the years, traveling all over the country with us by my side as my PI, making sure I was where I needed to be, making sure I was there on time, and making sure I always said the right things. It has been such a great friend along the way. Thank you to you, John, and your wife for both taking the time to fly up here. This really means a lot. As a lot of you know, I still enjoy racing and try to do it as much as I can, either here or in the north or down south with my son, Ryan. These days, with everybody having such a busy schedule, it's very hard to find guys who are willing to take a day or so to go to the racetrack. So I'm really thankful for the guys who give up their weekends so we can get out there and compete for that win. It is definitely at a different level nowadays, but we still have a good time, and every win is as sweet as the last. I'm more thoughtful and thankful these days as I reflect back upon the individuals that have helped me and helped our family race over the years. And there's about 10 of those guys that are with me tonight. So much time you've invested in our team to be competitive, so many evenings, so many days away from home, and so much time away from your family to do what we love doing, which is racing. Without those teammates and their dedication, my records would not shine as bright as they do. I feel very fortunate my family has been behind me throughout my racing career. Their support, their motivation were essential to get me here. All of that support led me to reaching goals, championships, longevity in the sport. Mom and Dad, I'm so thankful that we made some great family memories around those racetracks. You both gave up as much as I did, if not more. Both our children grew up to the racetrack, traveling around every weekend, missing a lot of their childhood activities. Importantly, we were all together as a family. They both contributed to the team so much. Ryan loves the sport, as it still has him racing today, enjoying that excitement of winning the next race. Sarah helped in many ways and always kept a smile on and always helped entertain the fan club. My wife, Roxanne, truly ran the day-to-day operations to get us to the track, kept us on schedule, get us organized, kept us in uniforms, and made sure the guys were always fed well throughout the weekend. We all realize now how many years later that a lot got missed while I did do what I loved, which was racing. At the time, it seemed like the little things, but reflecting back on it all now, especially that we have grandchildren, which are here today, those little things like missing Ryan's soccer games, track events, schools, trips, dance recitals, proms, or even her graduation weren't so little. We missed him, and as disappointed as we were, we knew to be a successful race team, we couldn't be in two places at once. So we weren't racing. It was the motivation, the determination, the devotion, the important thing, that were the important things at the time. But if I had to do it all over again, I definitely would choose both and try to be the same both places at the same time. My supporters and sponsors along the way were my family. If not family, they soon became family. Our family sponsor, which was R.C. Moore Transportation. I was very fortunate to have my wife's cousins come aboard in years to come. Jordan Lumber Company out of Kingfield, Richard Jordan, now who owns Wiscasset Speedway, and his brothers Les and Jonathan. Napa Auto Parts came aboard, and they still help me today. Tic Tac, Carol and Clayton Murphy. We had fun winning that championship with Tic Tac on board for sure. We also had Les K. Kitchens along the way, Bill Dodge Auto Group, and many others who provided funding to keep the race cars running. Jack Tan, a longtime friend and a remarkable person who built us some of the best racing engines over the year. Just a lot of great people to work with, great fans along the way, and I'm really grateful for all that support and that friendship. I am grateful for all the achievements along the way, and I wouldn't have changed a thing, but I will say, standing up here and being nominated and inducted into the Hall of Fame is very humbling. I'm very proud and honored, but more importantly, I'm proud of the devotion, dedication, and belief my family, my team, friends and family, fans, and supporters have given me over the year. In closing, I want to recognize everybody who came from near and far here to celebrate this afternoon. I've got to see several of you I have not seen in many years, so thank you very much for being here to support me and the entire Moore Racing team. Thank you.
And now to induct our final inductee, I bring Dave Sutherland back to the podium to induct fellow Big Blue fan, John Spence Sr.
A couple of months ago, I got a call from Pete Newsham. As I alluded to with Dave Grants, he asked me to induct Dave. Next day, the phone rang, and it was John. And he said, "Pete call you?" "Yeah, he called me about Dave Grants." And, No. I'm calling you. I'm going in. I want you to introduce me. So for the next 2 months, I've been trying to think of everything I know about John, which, as it turns out, is not much, because I didn't know he used to hang over the fence at Dave Grants' place when he was a kid. But then I looked at John's career, not only what I know of it as a fellow radio guy and fellow racetrack guy, but what's elucidated in his introduction. And it occurred to me that John and I are, in fact, twins from different mother. I'm older. John is the young, good-looking one, as the younger twin always is. Back in the mid-'70s, John was working in radio on the east side of New England at WOTW and the Rock Garden, which was one of my favorite stations back in the day. I was working on the east side of New Hampshire, west side rather, on the west coast at WKNE, doing the same thing, announcing on the radio. We both had radio race results programs. John's Speed Line was one that I found out about from somebody, God knows who now, but I needed results from mine because I'm stuck in Keene and there's nobody around me that's involved in racing outside of Monadnock. So I said, call John. So I called John. Oh yeah, I'd be glad to give you some results. So John would tell me about all the tracks that were in operation on the east side of New Hampshire and give me a voicer, which is always good for sound, and I'd do the same thing with Monadnock and Claremont. This went on for a number of years. As time goes on, other things change in our lives. At one point, John moved on, as you may have seen, to Nesson to do TV show. Great thing to do. Our paths changed, but our lives didn't change any. Oddly enough, John and I were both married at the time. Later on, we were both divorced. We are now both married to really incredible women who have made a very important part of our life. And then kind of went blank. As brothers do, you drift apart, you don't see each other. Along comes the Modified Racing Series. They started at Monadnock. They'd gone through a couple of announcers, and all of a sudden this tall guy walks into the booth, and it's John. Well, hi. Well, how you doing? It's like we just left dinner the night before, and we carried on a great conversation. After that, it became Tri-Track. Oh, here's John. And then the Super Modified Series came to Monadnock, and there's John. So, and then John said, well, I can't make the show, will you do it? So it turns out, I guess, that over the years, the one thing I have enjoyed about John is A, he's super smooth, B, there is no ego involved in his show at all. And I think he and Pete and I and Dave probably all share the same philosophy, which is we ain't the show, but without us there is no show. And when John's there, you know he's there, and you know what's going on the racetrack is important. So it just makes me really excited to induct into the 2021 Hall of Fame class my brother from another mother, the young, good-looking one, John Spence.
Boy, David, you did a real intense study on me. Me and microphones don't get along good. First of all, thank you, Dave. I was very grateful when you accepted my request for you to come up here and take care of my end of the deal, all for the reasons that you have given, that he's played a major part in my racing career, as well as several others who I am going to recognize here, but we'll get through this as quick as we possibly can. Can anybody adjust this? There. If I'm going to yak, I want to be. There's no cars running. It's quiet right now, David. I'd like to welcome, I guess, most of you to this facility and welcome you to the Whitcomb country. And you're saying, what's the Whitcomb country? Well, if you knew any of the local racers around here, it seems like they all live in Westford, Mass. And I just wanted to throw that in there. I'd like to welcome my family, my wife, Terry. We all hear the saying about my rock, my superstar. Terry is my rock and has been for 27 years. As Dave noted, we both rebounded well. And she's always there when I need her. Strongly has encouraged me to be involved in racing. to the degree that I am, different series, Friday night home track at Lee, et cetera, et cetera. So, honey, thank you for the support. I'd also like to recognize I'll tell you a story about Herb Simpson and microphones in a little bit. I'd also like to recognize my children that are here today. My daughter Jennifer, Shannon, Bobby, and I've had several people ask me, is Junior here? No, he's not. He couldn't be here. He resides in South Carolina. He's working this weekend. He works for Boeing. And as you know, with Boeing, they've had a lot of things go on, and so therefore he's got a lot of work, lots and lots of overtime. Yes, he is involved in racing. He's working for Florence Motor Speedway, and he just completed his second season there. I won't get into the details of the story because that's not what this is about, but he's very, very happy. He's working for a NASCAR-sanctioned track down there. Some of you may recall the Zacharias family from upstate New York. Well, Steve Zacharias is John's boss. They bought the track when they sold Myrtle Beach, moved on down to Timmonsville, South Carolina, in Cale Yarborough country, and that's where John is today. Thank you for asking. My granddaughters, Allie, Maddie, my grandson Ryan, his girlfriend, she's also a Maddie. I'm very happy that you're here. Thank you for taking the time to come visit. I know Madison is up in Vermont now with her boyfriend, so they made the trek down. So I'm grateful for that. I really greatly appreciate that, guys. Dave, that was good. I liked what you said. That's good memory about our days down at the bottom of Manchester Street and Lowell and Quebec Street. I learned of racing away from the racetrack because, as Dave noted, there was this ungodly rumbling sound that came from the backyard of his home on Quebec Street quite often. And that, of course, was firing up the race car or the jalopy, whatever it was, and doing the necessary work they would need to do to get ready for a weekend at Pines and Hudson. And he's the one that told me you used to see fingers going through the chain link fence. And yeah, that was me, Dave. And good memories, buddy. You could get a little bit more involved if you went over 2 streets. Dave was on Quebec, I was on Manchester. There was a street called Blossom Street. And then the next street over, the legendary Choppy Baldwin lived there. And I'll tell you, he could make some noise. Some of you may remember him, Choppy Baldwin. I got involved in racing back in 1960. My family, we went to Hudson. We went to the last race of the year, and that was that. And we had to look forward to the following season, and we did, 1961. And we became constant race fans at Pines and Hudson Speedway. So we were a traveling family. Wherever Ollie raced, we went. And it kind of stayed that way for quite a while. And then when I got my driver's license and I was able to go out on the road and do my thing, I was out on the road doing my thing. And that included an opportunity to get involved from a media standpoint, to work in conjunction with the radio show that I was going to travel around to different speedways and form up write-ups and send Dave some information from my show. And it just got off the ground in 1973. 1975, I got a call at the radio station. And it was the track's operator and manager, a great lady by the name of Flo Hudson. Flo ran the racetrack at Hudson and at Pines right up until its demise in '73. But she ran the thing all the years after Oscar Ridland had passed away, Terry Ridland was part of the operation there, but he pretty much just paid attention to what the money was looking like coming in and out. And Flo was the one that really got things going there for a lot of the competitors, and everybody loved working for Flo. When I went to work for Flo, she's the only promoter that offered me to come downstairs at intermission, and she had a couple of ice-cold bottled beers waiting for me. Yeah, she was pretty special. But I joined forces with them in 1975, but it was really a tough decision for me to make because, as he was recognized earlier today, my good friend, a dear friend, loved him like he was my father, and that was Jack Rada. Jack Rada called me and said, listen, I need you to do me a favor. And now, I had learned a lot from Jack the 2 previous years, and also Pete Zanardi as well, about how to handle the media and what needed to be done and so on and so forth, so that they would use the stuff. So anyway, I get the call from Jack, and he says, I need you to help me out. I said, what's that? I need you to help me at Hudson and Lee this weekend. I said, what? Why? He said, I'm not going to be here. I'm going out to Indianapolis to cover the 500 for the Union Leader, because Jack was employed at the Union Leader. And I said, okay. I said, I've never done it before. And he said, you'll be all right. I'll leave you my information. He says, you can have it. He says, you can. It's full of rosters and all the information you'll ever need. I said, okay. So I gave it a shot. Started up at Lee on Saturday night and came down to Hudson on Sunday. Got through it okay. I wasn't overly pleased with my effort, but the track seemed to be pleased, and that was that. During the course of the next week, I get a phone call, and it's Jack. And I thought he was just checking in. And, of course, keep in mind, this was regular telephones. We didn't have cell phones. We couldn't get into a long conversation. So anyway, he says, the typical, hey, buddy, I need a favor. I said, what now? He said, I'm still in Indianapolis. Jack forgot to come home. You can, if you knew Jack, you can figure that out. But anyway, I ended up there the following week, and that was A-okay. And then I got a phone call from Flo Hudson that week, and she says to me, John. I said, yes. She said, I need to talk to you. I said, okay. What about Flo? I want you to come to work for me. And I said, oh, boy. Not the way I wanted it to go. And I'll be honest with you, I never, ever, ever intended to be a track announcer. I just wanted to travel around, like Sean Corshane said earlier, do write-ups, do whatever you needed to do to put together some information, for the media. And that's all I wanted to do. So I ended up going to Hudson because she was literally begging me to go there. And a lot of you may not know, but the legendary Steve Bird, good old Birdie, he was the announcer at Hudson the year prior to Jack taking it. But he didn't want to do it anymore. He had had enough of doing it, and that was that. So I ended up filling in for Jack a third time. He calls me up, and I said, oh, boy, where are we now? He says, I want you to take it. And I said, Jack, I don't know if I want to do that. Well, I'll cut to the chase real quick. We had a fast phone conversation. He called Florence Hudson. He called Bob Bonzer up at Lee, and I agreed to give it a shot. I wasn't sure that I was going to stick with it, stay with it. I did not know if it was going to be for me, but I decided to do it. I hadn't done anything other than high school football games on radio, but we stuck and stuck and stuck and stuck. I just completed my 46th year announcing stock car races, and it's been a hell of a run. Thank you. Yeah, it's been a hell of a run, had a lot of fun. Some of the stuff I'd like to recognize. I'm not going to take up too much time. I can't even read my own typing. Ah, here we go. When you've been around as long as I have, you come in contact with many, many people. And I have, and I'm sure Dave has. I'm sure that Pete Falcone has. Anybody in our position comes in contact with drivers, car owners, racetrack operators, et cetera, et cetera. So over the years, yes, I've met a lot of great people up and down the East Coast and even into Canada. I'd like to extend a special thanks to Florence Hudson, the previously mentioned. She, as I indicated, was a very hard worker, and she was always made sure that she called me at the radio station by Wednesday, so I knew what she wanted to do for her commercial copy for the upcoming week at Hudson Speedway. What did she want to run in her ad? She says, I don't care what you run. Just do this. Make sure you mention Mo Tweedy. And I says, I will. Now, again, this is the first time I've experienced this with her. And I said, why's that? Because there's 50 that hate him and there's 50 that love him, and we want them all there. True story. I could tell you some Mo Tweedy stories, too, but, you know, it's a family operation here. Yeah, so we ended up doing that with Bob Bonzer. Bob Bonzer was an interesting character. For those of you that don't know, Bob Bonzer was the builder and the operator, the promoter, if you will, of the Tri-Oval in Lee, New Hampshire, Lee Raceway. That was an interesting gig. The first time Bob said he needed to give me a chat, he needed to have a little talk with me, he asked me to come over to his house. Now, if you're familiar with Bob Bonzer, you know who he is and what he does for a living, or did do for a living. The family still has the operation. But he wanted me to come over and have a chat over at his nudist colony. What's wrong with that? If you have ever been in there, you know the lay of the land. If you don't, the camp portion is way, way, way back. But anyway, he was an interesting character. He'd leave Lee on Friday nights, and if you can believe this, we were running opposite Star Speedway. We had to be out of our minds, because if you think that Lee is having low car counts right now, they were pretty low back then, because Nesmra was king up in that area. They had the supers, they had an outstanding car counts, and more importantly, they had a huge fan base. We had nothing much going in Lee, with the exception every once in a while we'd get a decent crowd, but it wasn't anything to write home to your grandmother about. So anyway, Bob would make this trip down to Epping religiously every Saturday night, just to get a glimpse at the parking lot. He'd take a trip through there, and then he'd come back up, and I don't know if he would be embellishing or what he'd be doing, but he's going on and on and on. You know what? You're damned if you do, and you're damned if you don't. That was his favorite line. You could never tell if he was telling you the truth or not, but he needed to go down and check on what Charlie Elliott was getting for fans down there at Star Speedway. No lie. Bob Weber. I had a great run with Bob at Star. He came to me shortly after buying the track, and I jumped at the opportunity. It was a difficult decision to leave Bonzer and go down the street, as they referred to it as, at Star Speedway, but I made that choice, and it worked out for the good. And I was there for several years, and I really enjoyed working for the big guy. Here today, and I was really glad to see them here, Red and Judy McDonald. What a time I had at Lee. Back in the day when they were the pro stock racetrack of the East, and they were really, really packing it in up there, they made a lot of noise. That was our racing term for really a good turnout of cars, a lot of this and a lot of that, all positive stuff. Red and Judy did a great job up there. And, of course, Pete Falcone was an announcer up there. I think I followed in his steps, or maybe Kevin Boucher's, to take over the Friday night announcing job. I think Pete had moved on from there. But it was really good to see fellow Hall of Famer Red McDonald and his bride Judy here today. Nice to see you folks. Thank you for coming. Thank you for supporting those that have gone into the Hall of Fame ahead of you. Also, Norman Wren, who currently owns Lee USA Speedway, Monadnock Speedway. David works for him over on that side of the state. And also Herb Simpson. Now, you're probably saying, where does Herb Simpson fit in here? Well, he fits in during an integral part, a real important part of Hudson Speedway history because Ridlin wanted to get out of Hudson. And they wanted to put it up for sale, and they did. Then came Dick Tate Brothers Paving up there in Hudson. He came to my house one night and said, I want you to come to work for me. And I'm going, I'm a radio guy. I'm not pounding asphalt. And he says, no. He says, I'm going to put an offer in for Hudson. I said, okay, what are you looking for from me? He says, maybe if you can just do the PR and do some announcing and stuff. I said, okay, all right, we'll look at it, see if we can come together on it. And he said, good deal. So he did, eventually. But he and his brother Billy decided to hold off on running the racetrack themselves because at that time, this was back in 1977, they were wicked busy in the asphalt paving business. And they decided to seek someone that could run the show. And they chose, or he chose, Cousin Herb Simpson. He came in for the 77 season, and that was quite an experience. Had a lot of fun. But the one thing that jumped out to me, and I was thinking about it driving here today, Herbie was Herbie. But the thing that he did to me the day before we were opening up at Hudson, he was down cleaning up down in front of the tower, cutting grass or whatever he was doing. And I said, hey, Herb, this microphone's not working. Now, I said it to him 3 or 4 times, but he never acknowledged me. So about the 5th time, I said, Herb, this thing is not working, and we're opening tomorrow. He says, John, if you don't get off my back about that microphone, I'm going to come up there and show you what you can do with your microphone. So the following year, another different operator comes into Hudson, and he asks both Bob Watson and myself to come on board in 1978. And a gentleman by the name of Ken Howard, who owned a business over in Plastow, New Hampshire, he leased it for a year. Basically, they were all keeping the thing open, and because of all the pressure from the townsfolk in Hudson. Then the Nesmer Group came in and took over. But that was quite an interesting experience, working for so many different promoters in a very short run. Okay, Jack Bateman, MRS, going on 18 years with that series. I've been with him since he started. And they're right now putting a schedule together for the upcoming year. These are people that I feel are very, very important to my career. They've done a lot for me to help me be a part of their gig, and I've enjoyed every one of the events that, or sanctions, I should say, that we've raced at. And that was been a hell of a run for Bateman. ISMA Super Modifieds. The day that I walked in down at Waterford Speed Bowl, they had contacted me and asked me if I'd come on board. They wanted an announcer, and they asked me if I would consider it. And I said, I looked at my schedule, and I said, yeah, I can do it. When I walked in there that day, it was like going home, the Super Modifieds. Because I had done so many Super Modified races in the early years, in the early 80s with Star Speedway, and a lot of those guys had advanced on to ISMA. It was like going home. And I'm still there for the New England shows. Also, Tri-Track Open Wheel. My good friend Dick Williams, Jimmy Schaefer, the racing guys, they got that thing off the ground. And boy, what a job they did. In time, the decision was made to go in a different direction. They sold. And today, It is run by Wayne Darling and Ed Bennett, but continues to grow. Proud to be a part of it. And I'm also working for SMAC. Some of you probably don't know what that is. It stands for Supermodifieds Allegiance, and I'm helping them out when I have the opportunity or I'm available, let's put it that way. But these following friends have been a big, big part of my life in all that I've done over the last 48 years. So I'd like to recognize them, and I'm going to wrap it up here. Very special people that had a big impact on what I was doing. As I mentioned, Bob Watson. Boy, oh boy, did we make a lot of noise. And that was at Lee. Developed that Yankee Modified division, did a whole lot of different promotions. And quite frankly, we drove Russ and Kenny crazy. Jerry Herview, who was a big part of our Speedline show when we launched it on WOTW. One guy here that is, I can tell you that he is very near and dear to my heart, and I miss him. Bob Devaney, the Barn Rat. Chris Romano, Bruce Cohen, Bruce Arnold, Kurt Gowdy Broadcasting. You're probably saying, Kurt Gowdy? Yeah, that Kurt Gowdy. Kurt was funny. I worked for him for 13 years. He was funny because he was a typical owner. He wanted to look over the books and see where we were strong in terms of money coming in and so on and so forth. And so therefore, he said, he was in his office one day. John Bassett was the general manager, and Kurt called everybody by the last name. Hey, Bassett, where's all this money coming from on Saturdays? Oh, that's Spencer's talk show. Talk show? Yeah. What kind of talk show? Motorsports. Yeah, we're on every Saturday. We were sold out. And we even had banks, 2 banks. And the first hour was one bank, second hour was another bank that wanted on that show because of the popularity and the reaction they were getting on the phones and some of the media that was picking up on it. Yeah, Gowdy liked that. New England Sports Channel, 1987. I had done some local access television, but I never did anything around the world at the time because they had them big, big dishes in the backyard, and we were doing pretty much the same concept as the Speedline radio show, taking telephone calls that turned out to be from everywhere. Heavy, heavy amount of calls from down Florida, and we were getting calls from guys that I had not heard from in years that were calling the show. And we had an outstanding lineup of people, and whenever I needed something to be good and to get things started in the proper way, I always, always reached out to Ronnie Bouchard. Ronnie, I called him up at the dealership and I said, listen, he says, what do you got going? I said, we're going to debut a television show that's going to be on by the satellite all over the country, but it's geared toward New England auto racing. When do you need me or what time? That was always Ronnie's answer. I remember when we were doing a race car show up at the Armory in Manchester. Who do you think I reached out to? And we got the 47 up there, and we actually had tire competition. Ronnie was there overseeing the whole thing. I did movie parties, pretty much like Dan Pardee did, up in the Merrimack Valley, southern New Hampshire, northeastern Massachusetts. And Ronnie was always my special guest. One year he couldn't make it, and the guy took the time to call. And he had a hard time. Excuse me. He had a hard time getting a call through because it was in a Catholic church hall. So they ended up calling a rectory. And they were able to get me to come to the phone that way. But it was Ronnie, and he couldn't get out of his driveway because of an ice storm. But the guy was all apologies. I said, Ronnie, don't let it bother you, man. I'd rather have you do that than have an accident on the way here. That's the kind of guy he was. So, also, Kenny Smith, Russ Conway. Can't say enough about the both of them. They played a major, major part in my career in this racing business. Russ was like having a bitchy brother. I say that tongue-in-cheek, because boy, oh boy, he'd get on me sometimes. But anyway, we had some great years working in conjunction with NESMRA. NESMRA, to me, was probably one of the best sanctions that ever happened in the New England region. And I'll wrap it up this way. Before I do, I want to say a very special hello to some people I recognized in the audience today. Eric Hudson and Jill. Nice to have you with us here. Dave Dion's up from Florida. He told me he would be here this past summer. He's here. Also, my buddy Dickie Spofford, Bobby Whitcomb. Good to see you guys out there. Annette, Joyce, and David, Steve Lochner, and Lori. Good friends of me and Terry. And Steve was the tech man when I went to work in 1975 at Lee. I will close it up with this, folks. Ordinary people with extraordinary careers. Ollie Silva, Eddie West, Charlie Elliott, Don McLaren, Smokey Boutwell, Russ Conway, Ken Smith, Bentley Warren, Dick Batchelder, Dick Berggren, Howard Brown, Paul Richardson, Peter Fiandaca, Mike Murphy, Vic Miller, Skip Matzak, Jerry Dolliver, Russ Nutting, Jim Martell, Lou Boyd, Red McDonald, Paul Dunnigan, Russ Wood, Bobby Gahan, Bob Weber Sr. And now you have Dave Grants from Lowell and John Spence from Lowell. Thank you to the committees. Thank you to NEAR. Much appreciated, and I am definitely humbled. God bless.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have one more award. Please have your attention. Every year, there are people that put on this function. And every year at our annual meeting, we recognize somebody that's gone above and beyond their usual role of duty to help NEAR. And that person this year put together this book, did everything in this book. She did all the banquet arrangements, and she is our MVP for this year, April May Preston.
Okay, I should have done this at the conclusion of my time up here, but I didn't have the opportunity because we're really trying to get this thing moving along for you. But I do want to recognize somebody that is here, and I hope you'll make it nice and loud and make it clear. Please, please welcome the traveling man, Pete Fiandaca, who is with us. Thank you. Good to see you, Pete.
Once again, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming to the 2021 NEAR Awards. It has been my pleasure to honor heroes of this sport. We'll see you at the track in 2022. Good night, and have a healthy and happy off-season.